Greetings and welcome to another clock update. I would apologize for the vertical filming, but I'm going to be doing a lot of clock stuff that's on a wall hanging up, and so I'm going to use vertical because it'll show more easier. So here we go. This is an update for the Peace Tower paper clock, which has been the bane of my existence for about a year now. Almost a year. I've done some repairs to it, and I thought it might be time for another update. So this clock has only run for about 1 of the 12 months that I've had it together, just due to many problems. If you've been following along with this clock, you'll remember that I hated the default escapement that came with it, so I replaced it with my own, of my own design, and that is possibly the best part in this clock, because it took me 7 tries to perfect it. But with the new escapement comes a new gear ratio right here, these wooden gears. I don't know how well it shows here, but you can kind of tell that when I got to that last gear there, I got a little lazy, and it's in there crooked. That's just how the hole is bored through for the axle, so it's just going to sit crooked. Rather than make a whole new one from scratch, I took it out, copied it on my scanner, printed out a new one, and doubled it up. So you can see the thickness there is double. That way as it wobbles, it will not disengage with the teeth of the lower one. They'll line up down there eventually, and it can wobble back and forth and not miss any more teeth. So that's the big one. I'd wake up in the morning and realize the clock is missing an hour or two. It's like, what happened? I know it's not that fast or slow. Nah, the teeth were slipping behind. So, got that fixed up. The biggest problem with this clock is, of course, the paper frame. So it sags with all the weight here coming down on this string. It causes the whole frame to sag quite a bit forward, which throws all of these gears out of alignment. So I've had to align them and realign them and take them apart and realign them again, and it's a mess. And really, I think it's beyond repair in terms of getting them lined up. The worst part about that is when you put the frame together, it doesn't give you any kind of guide holes as to where those gears go. It just gives you a rough measurement and then lets you figure it out on your own. Oh, I'll drill a hole about here roughly. That's fine. And then hope it lines up. Well, if I had to do this clock again, which I may someday, I would put them in at a slope upwards. That way when the frame inevitably sags, they'll flatten out level. So if you're just starting on a Peace Tower clock, put your gears in with a slant upwards towards the front. That way when the frame sags, and it will, your gears line up. Another issue is the weight. The factory weight, pull it in here, which I keep in a drawer. This weight, I don't know how they ever expected this to work, because when it gets down to here, it rubs against the pendulum. No matter how you hang it on that motor spool there, it's just going to rub against the pendulum. It just does. So I have taken this weight out and experimented around with various weights, and I think I've got one here I like. When I release the addendum, okay, I am planning to release an addendum for these gears and escapement and all the modifications that I made, so you can do this at home, because out of the box the clock will only run for about, I think, an hour or 2 tops before the weight hits the floor and you have to wind it back up. So that's going to leave you winding a clock all day long. This modification gives you like 13 hours. Well, depending on how high you hang it. Gives you 13 hours per wind, which means you only have to wind it twice a day. Yeah, and I get by with that just fine. So if the clock runs all night after all the repairs I've made today, then I will put in the effort to document all of that stuff in one place, and I will include the link to download the instructions and cutouts under every one of these Peace Tower clock videos. That way nobody ever has to ask, hey, where are those things? Which one is it under? Sound good? Let's see, is that time about right? Yes. Yes, excellent. Okay. So, there's another thing I wanted to say about this clock before I go to sleep. It's a chore. Man, it's a chore. It's working now. Look at that. So I'm going to use this exact escapement in the Petros wooden clock that I'm designing. Except, you see how that escape wheel there? It's about 2.5 inches in diameter. The escape wheel, that same wheel, has been sized up. For the new clock, it's going to be 18 inches in diameter. So the 2.5 inches, it's going to be 18 inches. That's going to be a big flipping wheel. I started with the escape wheel and designed the rest of the clock around it so that I don't have to worry about trying to fit it in. The problem is, with it being that small, I had to be really precise cutting it, which meant I had to cut it like 7 times to get it right, just right. And I did. I did a fantastic job. That is the best part of this clock, is that heartbeat back there. As it should be. As it should be. But the rest of the clock should be a little more reliable than that, you know. Okay, so I need to figure out how much weight that is. Another thing I had to do, because the original clock was at, I think, 70 hertz or maybe 80 hertz. Not 80 hertz, 80 beats, 80 swings per minute with the whole ratio of the gearing and the, I did the math once upon a time. What I ended up having to do was extend the pendulum arm. You can see the white printer paper here that I used, and you'll need to do that if you apply this. Is you'll want a full meter-long pendulum arm. So I've kind of got it tacked down there at the very bottom. I recommend figuring out what one of these sections is and just adding a whole nother section in terms of length. That way you've got plenty of room to play with your adjustment. Okay, anything else to say about this clock? Now that I'm working on a new one, I could not just sit and stare at this dead clock any longer. So I figured I'm either going to get it running today or we're going to have a nice little campfire. And I know just what to use for kindling. Ugh, this thing's a chore. If you're going to attempt this clock, make sure you have a good ruler, a compass. Make sure everything lines up before you put it together. But even if you do, you can see how much it sags. Good ½ an inch at the top. Ugh. It's just horrible. All right. Peace Tower paper clock.